That concludes my state and federal report. I can move right into a quick update on the Hoover Commission if you'd like. That's the next item
Okay,
on the agenda.
let's do that,
Okay.
and then we'll take a short break.
Okay. As you know, the Little Hoover Commission has been engaged in a community college research project for this past year. The Hoover Commission has been around for decades. It was established in 1962, and its purpose is to investigate state government operations and to look at how you can bring greater efficiencies and productivity to government. They've decided to look at community colleges as a key priority because of the growing demand for community college access, as well during a time when in fact we're seeing a decline in state resources. So they have held a series of hearings, mostly in Sacramento. They've been full public hearings. A number of you have been present or have testified. Chancellor Jack Scott testified at the first hearing, as well as various other community college representatives. They have also interviewed a lot of community college trustees and stakeholders from various sectors within the community college system. So I think they have really looked into our world, and they recognize how complex the issues are that we're dealing with. That's the one theme that we have heard from them is, gee, community colleges are really complex and big. But the three areas that they're looking at are governance, basic skills, and current funding issues and finance policy. They're going to have their last hearing on October 7th, and that hearing is going to focus on finance issues related to the community colleges. And then they're expected to draft their report and issue a report, coincidentally, in January of 2012. It'll be released about the same time that we'll be releasing our formal Student Success Task Force report to this body. The issues that they're looking at are in governance. They think that there's a need to have a stronger system governance structure, but they recognize how complex it is, and while they were leaning toward looking at regional local governments, they realize that's very difficult, but instead they focused on the Chancellor's Office and what can be done to strengthen the Chancellor's Office to be able to provide stronger leadership to the system. I don't know what the nature of the recommendations are that are going to come out, but they seem to be very interested in that area. In basic skills, they spent numerous hearings covering basic skills and understand that this is a very challenging area, not just for the community colleges, but also for K-12. And with funding cuts, this is an area that has been hit very hard. There seems to be some indication that they think that basic skills within the community colleges for non-credit basic skills should probably be combined with adult ed. I know that's a significant and controversial concept, but they think that if basic skills or adult learning probably best belongs with the community colleges, but also I'm not clear whether in the final analysis they'll make that recommendation, but they have expressed a lot of interest in that area. On finance policy, they haven't had their hearing, so I don't know, what their line of questioning will be, nor what their concerns are. But they have been working closely with us. They have been watching the work of the Student Success Task Force. They've had a number of very smaller group discussions with stakeholders from all walks of life, actually, and they're getting feedback from a lot of different people. The work they do when they issue these reports, they're reports with recommendations. They don't always go into legislation. Sometimes they do. The most recent report they issued was on pension reform. I think it was last fall, and it did get a lot of news and publicity. Whether or not it shaped the negotiations of pensions, it's hard to say. But I do think that they seem to care a great deal about helping students succeed, and their goals seem to be pretty well aligned with our goals. So hopefully their recommendations will dovetail with a lot of what we'll recommend and help explain what's needed to in fact bring about these reforms and improvements that we're attempting to to make in the community college system. So I think that, it's a public group. There's 13 members on the board. There's about 5 gubernatorial appointments. There's 2 appointments from the Senate Pro Tem, 2 from the Assembly Speaker, and there are 4 sitting legislators who serve on this board. So I think it's something for us to pay attention to, and as we learn more about the recommendations, hopefully by November, I think we'll be able to report back on where it is they're headed. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Member Baca?
Particularly as a teacher of government, the community college governance reminds me a lot of those early years of the Union when it existed under the Articles of Confederation. The central government had no real power. What have they been talking about somewhat specifically in terms of strengthening the Chancellor's office? I'm sure Chancellor Scott has given them a lot of information, but are there some points that they're keying in on?
I think that they recognize that they have keyed in on whether or not the Chancellor's Office should be a state agency, whether it would be able to act more effectively if it were a state entity similar to UC and CSU. They've referenced that. They've referenced, giving the Chancellor broader authority, at least to appoint his staff. They recognize how complicated it is that, the Chancellor doesn't have any authority to require colleges to do anything, but they're going to have their finance committee, and some of the early discussions have been if there's a way for the Chancellor's office to utilize some funding authority, but I have no idea what they might be looking at. They did talk to a lot of trustees and got a lot of feedback that many in the system think that a strong Chancellor's office would be very helpful to the system. I think that they, have heard some pretty extreme proposals that, you have, collapse districts into regions, but I think that they realize that's easier said than done, and it's very complicated, and that the districts serve a valuable purpose locally. It's not just a simple act to convert to regions. So I don't know any more than that. I think that they really have stepped into the complexity of our world, and they recognize that.
I was gratified to hear that they're awaiting the results of the Student Success Task Force because, and as I mentioned yesterday, I'm hoping that there's going to be broad areas of alignment and no areas of disagreement on steps that should be taken. And that's your impression too?
It is. They've been very, I think they recognize the challenging environment in which we work. So they haven't approached this research in a punitive fashion, that we're going to find, better ways to do your job, and it hasn't been that approach at all. They've been actually very, they've worked very closely with us, and we've given them a lot of information. So I'm hoping that they recognize that we do have big challenges, but that, that there are some reasonable ways to try to address these issues in a more, in a methodical, thoughtful fashion.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, let's take a short 10-minute break. Then we'll get to our Student Success Task Force. We have some people who would like to speak, and then with the board's permission, I would like to maybe try to make a dent into tomorrow's agenda if we have time remaining. So let's take a 10-minute break.